Hello everyone and welcome to another beer review. Now today we're doing a Sunday video, really. Well, I hope it's a Sunday video. I don't have any whiskey down, as you probably noticed. And we're doing a beer from a brewery that used to have quite a good reputation in the past. I really don't know what reputation they really have now and what the beers are like now, so I think this is the reason why we're doing the reviews, to find out. So today we're doing Olympia from the Harvey's brewery in Sussex. So yeah, so the brewery and everything else is based in Lewes in Sussex. And if I remember rightly, the company started in 1790. Everybody says, oh, they've been brewing since 1790. Well, they haven't. They were actually kind of a wine and drinks merchant, and it started in 1790. I think they started to kind of initially do some sideline brewing in 1820. So you'd say probably the brewery kind of really started in 1820. And obviously it's continued on through the years and different generations. It's still a private owned kind of company anyway, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing nowadays, because usually if it's a really good company or a really good brewery, then either the big conglomerates will buy it over and ruin it, you know, that kind of thing, or if they don't think it's worth the money, then they won't touch it, you know. So anyway, who knows. What does it say about it? Sussex Golden Ale. This soft golden ale is brewed using clarity malt and the gentle bitterness of Fuggle and golden aroma hops. Best served chilled, la-di-da-di-da. Refreshing and light golden ale, a hoppy summer favourite. There we go. Well, it's kind of better weather. Although, shout out to them. They delivered this within a couple of days. They only charged just over £5 for delivery. What I did like was that they actually used APC, which some of the other breweries have used APC, but every other company I've had that's used APC couriers, they've charged well over 10 quid. In fact, the one that charged 14 quid for delivery was APC couriers that they used, and I'm thinking, well, if Harvey's can do it for just over £5, what the hell he's playing at? And it was a proper box with a bottle carton base and a bottle carton top and everything else to stop the bottles from moving and everything else. So it was well packaged, but they didn't feel the need to actually rip people off, you know, on the courier fees and the delivery fees. So fair play to Harvey's for that. Maybe some other brewers and breweries should actually take a kind of leaf out of their book and learn not to kind of screw over their customers. Any other information? 4%, 500ml. Should we crack it open and see what it's like? Oh yes! Yeah. I'm actually getting this video out because I need to get some videos sorted out, because I'm nipping off to Lanzarote. As we used to call it, Lanzarote. But yeah, I'm going over there. Not really because I want to, it's because the wife wants to go and I'm getting dragged over to, I mean, seriously, I'm getting dragged there to keep her company because she didn't really fancy going herself, although I think we're all quite happy if she went herself, you know, but no. Anyway, so I thought, well, I need to get some of my videos in order, so I'll get things sorted out while I'm away. I'll maybe try and do some beer reviews, although Sloppy Dave, he's obviously been in Portugal doing videos. Lucky boy, because he was doing some decent beers and things like that. But he says I'll be hard pushed to try and find a decent beer in Lanzarote, which he might actually be quite right about, but I'll give it a go. If it's just lagers and things like that, then I'm not going to. I haven't been in Lanzarote for years, so I couldn't really tell you what it's like. I remember the wife brought me back some beer from Lanzarote, which was okay. One of them absolutely, oh Jesus, it exploded on me. It went bloody everywhere. I'm sure there's a videos there about it, but yeah, that was a nightmare. So yeah, so who knows how it's going to go. But I'll try my best to try and find it. I'm not going to do lagers and things like that, because at the end of the day, stuff that, I'm just not my cup of tea, really, so I don't see the point. That's what I smell of. Nothing really. I can smell more carbonation. Not really getting any malt. Maybe a little bit of hops, but yeah, lacking in the aroma. So let's see what it tastes like. Maybe on the sweeter side. Like I say, lacking a little bit of flavour, but it's a golden ale, and lots of golden ales lack flavour. But if you compare them to lager, they've got a heck of a lot of flavour, to be totally honest. Let's not kid ourselves. And I've always said that if I had the choice, do you want a lager? What else you got? I've got golden ale. I'll have the golden ale. Would be my response. Unless it's a golden ale with New World hops, and all that kind of wonderful citrus and pininess, like shove that cup of tea, please, But it's roasting. Trust me, I can always blow on it, But no, this seems to be a kind of easy drinking golden ale, to be totally honest. Not busting with flavour, but pleasant enough. And more pleasant than what I'd find in a bottle or a can that says lager on it and things like that. One of the major things is because it's got a nicer mouthfeel anyway, so it's got a bit of a softer mouthfeel, so it actually feels more refreshing, because you could really sink it if you wanted to from that point. But yeah, just in general, nice little bit of malt at the front end. Not really much going on in the mid-tongue, maybe a little bit of hoppiness in it, and a very light, slightly bitterness kind of finish. But yeah, very light. But yeah, overall it seems to be not too bad. Will I find something like this in Lanzarote? I honestly really don't know. But what I would say is, if you compare, like, say, Portugal to Spain, I would say Portugal is well ahead of Spain on the craft beer front. And what I like about the Portuguese kind of craft beer is, yeah, they do your IPAs and all these type of stuff, and they'll do your New World hopped beers and things like that, just like they do over here. But they also do good kind of traditional ales as well. They'll do amber ales, they'll do bitters, they'll do Vienna lagers, they'll do so many different types. They'll do the stouts, they'll do the porters and all this type of stuff, and I like that, because it shows that, yeah, they understand that, yeah, New World hop beers and things like that are quite popular, but they also understand the importance of the traditional beers, because let's be totally honest, it's where it all started, and there's a good chance that people say it's probably where it's going to finish as well. And yeah, I like that. I like that kind of attitude where they understand there's a balance, and while they make quite a range of these IPAs and things like that, and pale ales and all this kind of stuff, they're doing some traditional beers as well. So again, they understand it's better to appeal to both worlds than to get all in on one side and just totally ignore the other side, which happens a lot with craft beers over here. The breweries just, they might do the odd porter or the odd stout, but of course they'll put stupid flavours in it, that type of stuff, and all these adjuncts and everything else, and that'll be wonderful, that kind of stuff. Oh, vanilla ice cream stout, oh, fuck off, seriously. They can't actually make a proper beer. And you find a lot of these craft breweries in the UK, they can't make a proper traditional beer. They can't make a really good stout, you know, or a really good porter. No, they've got to make a stupid porter or a stupid stout to go along with their basically over-hopped pale ales and IPAs and things like that. And there's the problem. I mean, for a business point of view, why would you basically ignore one side of the market? If you could make a couple of good traditional beers, first of all, you actually show that you're actually a decent brewery, because you show you can actually do the traditional stuff without all the kind of stupid flavours and the ridiculous amount of hops to hide your mistakes. So first of all, you get more respect that way. And secondly, if you're making good beers from a traditional bent, then traditional beer drinkers will drink them. I mean, why wouldn't you, you know? Strange that, isn't it? Yeah. God, we're thick as shit in this country, so yeah. Well, I would say we are thick as shit because, let's be totally honest, I'm just looking at it. The country has gradually been going downhill. Quality of life has been going downhill. Cost of living has been going up. We've had absolute shitty government since the 90s. You know what I mean? You know, 90s, noughties, the whole blooming lot, just shit governments, time and time again. It doesn't matter what political party, whatever, just shit governments. And you sit there thinking, why have we not just said, no, enough's enough? Why have we not just turned around and said, hey, this can't continue. It stops now. But no, you still let it go. You know, it's just madness. I just don't understand that. You know. Yeah. Growing up, I always found very strange is that growing up, people used to own their cars. So it was. And because of that, car prices had to work in with people's wages and everything else. And it worked a treat. Because the case is, oh, you mean, there was a good kind of, how would you say it, options on the price range, you know, price options. And people would buy, you know, cars they could afford if they're going to be new, or have the knock-on effect as people would buy second-hand cars they could afford and everything else. Nowadays, people don't buy cars. They rent them, they lease them, whatever, and that type of stuff. And I don't seem to understand is that's allowed the prices to become ridiculous. So there used to be the cases, all right, I can only afford a car round about, you know, the 12,000 mark. If I buy a new car, that's all I can afford is 12,000. So you look at the ones within your price range and you try and see which is kind of giving you the best offer or the best deal or the most suitable stroke reliable car you can get for that money. There you go. Nowadays is the cases of people say, well, hey, I can only afford this monthly payment. And then they will buy a car based on that, regardless of the price. And you're sitting there thinking, the world's gone mad. It really has. You spend all that money just to ride out in something that even when they advertise it and they kind of give you the kind of a basic finance example in the advert, they'll say, you do not own the car. You know, you're thinking, oh, Jesus. And I think it was around about that time when people stopped buying cars and actually owning them, you know, that life started to kind of go downhill in lots of other areas. The minute people accepted to spend all that money on a purchase that was never a purchase, and you don't actually, and I think it's absolutely brilliant, because you spend all this money monthly on a car, you pay the insurance and the road tax and all the servicing, and I think this is brilliant. You know, you're spending all this money to basically put your car in for a service. You're thinking, wait a minute here, I'm servicing the car for their benefit. It's not my benefit, because it's not my car. And at the end of the day, why would I give a shit? But then you're tied into it, because at the end of the day, they have the finances based on a set kind of final value of the car once it's handed back. And if there's anything that goes against that to actually lower that value, then you actually have to pay a penalty. And I think that's amazing. You know, it's crazy. I'm old school. I always work on the basis is if you buy a car, you should own the car. It's like almost the cases though that people want to buy a house. This is the thing that I don't seem to kind of get the connection. You know, bear with me on this one. I think you're probably thinking, well, what about the beer? But I just find this strange. People nowadays are complaining because they can't buy a house, they can't afford to buy a house, especially young people and everything else. But we watch on the basis is, right, yeah, you want to buy a house and own your own house, but you also want to buy a car and own your own car. They were two very kind of similar aspirations. And a lot of times we'd probably get ourselves owning our own car first before we'd be able to kind of get our own house. But that was always part of the aspirations and everything else, and that was all kind of going hand in hand. Whereas nowadays, people, I don't want to rent anymore. You know, it's a waste of money renting. So it's a waste of money renting. So you want to be able to buy a house to stay in it because that's a better investment. But you don't see the same of that in a car. But in saying that, if you're driving around in a car that really, let's be totally honest, you couldn't afford to buy, but you can afford to rent for 3 years, that helps with the old status, doesn't it? And I think there's the problem. It's one of the problems in today's society is status means too much in a lot of people's lives. And starting out, when we started out, and obviously further down the line as well, people further in the past, when we were starting out, you couldn't think about status. You could dream about it, but you really couldn't think about it, because at the end of the day, we'd all go about with bangers and all cars and things like that and slowly build up and everything else, because that was reality. And servicing your car, Jesus, you would do it yourself because you couldn't afford to take it to a garage, you know what I mean? Jesus, you're hanging about scrappies and, you know, sometimes things used to get bad, you'd actually go to the scrappy and that type of stuff. Oh, I'm looking for this. And you say, oh, well, I don't know. There might be one over there, but I don't know if there's actually it. And you've actually lied, because you're only there to actually steal something else. But that's what you do. You'll go there and pretend to look for this part that you're not actually wanting, and then you'll nick the part that you actually do, you know, because it's a small part and things like that. And that's what you used to do. And you'd be driving from one scrappy to the next to try and find a spare part to fix your car. So there was no room for status, because you really couldn't have any, because we were all basically, you know, slim pickings, you know. We're all basically scratching the ground to try and get in, keep things going. Whereas nowadays, no. And I think that's why the cases of quality of life isn't as good. And it just has the same effect. The standard of life has dropped. And yeah, we pay more for beer now than we've ever done. And it's nowhere near to the same standard as what it used to be. And then you have to kind of ask yourself, well, what are we doing? You know? Work hasn't got any better. Work life hasn't got any better. The work-life balance hasn't got any better. Nothing has actually got any better. So I look on the basis of, since I started doing things in the kind of late 80s and 90s and things like that, and started to kind of move on in my life as a kind of young adult, you're looking at it thinking, things haven't actually got any better, they've actually got worse. And while I've kind of managed to kind of keep my own life in control and that type of stuff, it's a lot more difficult for young people, you know. And I'm just kind of thinking, we think, what's the attractiveness of traditional beers nowadays for young people? Because I was thinking about my kids, and I'm thinking, they don't really understand pub culture. I was speaking to my youngest boy, and he couldn't understand what pub culture was about. Why do people want to go and spend time in a pub? Well, what's that about? It's not even a particularly nice environment. And they just want to go there and get pissed. And I'm trying to kind of explain to them, I says, but no, that's not the case. And I tried to explain to them in the past that the local pub was a kind of a central part of the community. It was a big part of your social life. People didn't always just sit in front of the television watching TV shows. People didn't have internet and all this type of stuff. So if people wanted to socialise with their friends, they would go and meet up with them in the pub. And they'd have a few pints or whatever and things like that, a few drinks, and just kind of catch up and meet up with friends and have a good night chatting and just spending time with each other. And that's men and women. And he kind of strangely just thinks that pubs is to do with men, it's not really for women. I'm like, well, no, it's for both. But it just kind of shows you how obscured the kind of outlook of the young people nowadays, that they walk past pubs, they don't really understand what they're about. And if that's the case, then how are they really going to understand beer and quality beer? Because they can't, because there isn't really any kind of quality beer a lot of times. If you go into most pubs nowadays, you know, most of them are going to buy the crappy, well-branded beers and things like that. But even then, with the price of them nowadays in pubs and things like that, why would they even go near the pubs? And I'm just thinking, even though we're drinking more traditional beers, a lot of the ones stocked with pubs now, they're not even that good either, you know, because they've started to go downhill and things like that. And you're thinking, so what is the attraction for young people to get into traditional beer? Or even craft beer at that point, you know, kind of outlook. And I kind of struggle to kind of understand what would attract them. Because right now, I can't really see the attraction for young people to get into beer. And especially traditional beer, and to a certain degree craft beer as well. And you kind of ask yourself then, where does the future really lie? I mean, I'm in my 50s. I'm sure there's people in their 30s and things like that that maybe like kind of some traditional ales or kind of craft ales or something like that, you know. But the people in their kind of 20s are kind of lacking that now. People in the late teens are definitely lacking that. And you're sitting there thinking, you're moving towards this generation where we're all going to kind of disappear as beer drinkers, and what you're going to be left with is a lot of times either non-beer drinkers or a lot of people that just don't really drink at all. And then where's the future of the breweries? And I think this is the case, is we're getting very close to kind of the last generations of kind of proper beer drinkers. I think we're getting close to that now, and it's quite scary. On the basis of, I mean, there's probably a good chance that when these kind of beer sales really start to kind of drop in the UK, especially from a traditional point of view, I mean, really start to drop, there's a good chance I'll be in my twilight years or probably even dead, you know, thank God. But yeah, it's just kind of scary that is the case. So what can you do to attract people that don't even understand pub culture? They actually think it's a bad thing. And I'm trying to explain to them it's not a bad thing. Pub culture isn't a bad thing. And going sitting in the pub with your pals, drinking, you're not there to get pissed. Maybe some people are. But a lot of people are just there just to enjoy the company and some nice beer and, you know, and just to be social. And just trying to get that into their heads. It's just kind of strange. I never actually thought about it, but I was in Copenhagen. We ended up having, I just asked my youngest boy, what kind of things annoy him in life? And the first thing he says is women that basically go about with fake tan and lots of makeup and lots of things. It just annoys me. I don't see the point of that. It's not attractive. I don't know why they do it. And it just looks stupid. And it just annoys me why somebody would do that. Why would you? I mean, it's like, he kind of compared it to basically clown makeup. It's like basically dressing up as a clown. Nobody would do that every day to go out and try and kind of look attractive. So they're almost doing that themselves. So why do they honestly think being kind of a strange colour of orange with all this plastered makeup on is attractive, you know? I'm like, yeah, good point. And yeah, it's quite popular, but it was also been popular right back when I was a kind of a teenager, that, especially in Scotland, it was always a popular thing. Apparently, being tanned, even if you looked orange, was a class of kind of looking healthy and good looking. You think, you know. And then he actually said there's old kind of men and that type of stuff in pubs, you know, angry men in pubs. What do you mean by angry men? Well, you know, men just go to pubs and that type of stuff, and they're just not a nice environment. And like, whoa, 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 whoa. Just because you're in a pub doesn't mean you're angry. And, you know, I'll try to kind of explain to them that the kind of history of pub culture and everything else, going back and how important it used to be and everything else. But just quite shocked that he's seen pub culture as a bad thing, and people that drank in pubs, and men especially, who were, you know, constantly just hanging about pubs and drinking in pubs, as, you know, as bad people. He's quite scary, because that means it's, you know, I'm kind of in that kind of groupie, you know what I mean? Like, well, I'm a bad, you know. You're right, I am, you know. Right, sure, break down these flavours. Yeah, like I said, very kind of light malt, a little bit of sweetness there, a wee bit of grain. A little bit, I would say the sweetness, I'm not saying it's overly sweet, but it is an okay level of sweetness, you know. And the malt works together with the sweetness and a little bit of grain, moves on to the mid-tongue. And it's just very much of the muchness in the mid-tongue, just the kind of repetition of the front of the mouth. Maybe the odd little accent, maybe ever so kind of slight hint of the odd bit of bitterness. Nothing floral, nothing like, just a little bit of bitterness. And that's what you get just when you get to the back end. It transfers from the mid-tongue to the back of the mouth. You maybe just get a little, ever so slightly little spike of bitterness, and then it just, everything just dissipates together very cleanly. And overall, yeah, it's okay. Like I said, nice mouthfeel. I'm not saying it's a wonderful or brilliant pint, it's just a very kind of, I would say, a very kind of easy drinking. I could see me drinking a cold one of these on a hot summer's day quite easily, before I would pick any lager available in any supermarket. So there you go. I mean, it'd be quite easy. I would choose this over every single lager available in Tesco's on any given day, or Sainsbury's, or Asda, or Lidl, or Aldi, or Morrison's, or Waitrose. So there you go. Is it the best or favourite beer that I would probably want to have on a hot summer's day? No, but I'd be quite happy to have it because, yeah, it's quite nice and pleasant. Yeah, it's on the lighter side, but that's not so bad. If it's a hot day and you just basically want refreshment and have a few of them just to kind of cool down and relax. Nice on barbecues, things like that. Nice to have if you've got the mates round for a bit of football and things like that, you know, a bit of football fanship, as they call it. But what would I give it out of 10? It's fine. I'm not going to say it's wonderful. I'm not going to say it's great. I would probably say, on the basis of the type of beer, it's probably slightly above average. But overall, yeah, it's actually quite nice. Price-wise, well, there's the thing. I'll put the prices down below. But what I would say with most breweries is they're all kind of charging roughly the same. I mean, they're all kind of between £30 and £35 for 12 bottles. You know, they're all kind of fluctuate between that kind of, maybe some you get the odd ones down at about kind of maybe £28 for 12 bottles, but they're all around about the kind of £30 mark up to roughly about 35, 36. So a lot of times you're not really going to get many bargains from a brewery. I would probably say it's probably one of the most dearer places to buy beer. I mean, even if I look at beers that are for sale in the supermarket and I'm getting them for around about, just under £2 or around about £2, and then you find them in their website and they're charging £2.30, £2.50 per bottle, you're thinking, what's the point? What's the point? So you don't get many bargains from a brewery nowadays. So yeah, you've got to take that into account. It's not the cheapest way to buy beer, but to some extent, if it's quality you're after, then it's probably the better place to buy beer. So on that basis, I'm just going to give it an easy Aussie 6. It's just a little bit above average. It's a nice enough beer, easy drinking. Price wise, it's kind of in the mix. The thing is though, they're not ripping you off for delivery. They're charging you kind of normal delivery costs. So that's in their favour anyway. So I think that's probably, I would probably give the beer maybe a bit, it's kind of around about 5.5, 6. But I've given it a 6 because they didn't rip us off on the delivery as well. So it's all part of it. So yeah, so it's 4%. It's Harvey's Olympia, 500ml bottle. It's 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye for now.